Welcome back to BLOCKTV. I'm Ron Friedman, and this is Crypto Crunch, where we break down the top stories of the week with the help of Rachel McIntosh, an accomplished reporter from finance magnates. Rachel joins us today from Helsinki. Great to see you, Rachel.
Great to see you too, Ron.
Excellent. So let's get right into it. We asked you to choose your top stories from finance magnates for this week. I want to start with one that rings close to home. Israeli banks no longer refuse services to crypto firms. This is a recent announcement statement by the Attorney General. Why don't you break it down for us?
Right, exactly. So the Attorney General announced earlier this week in a district court that banks cannot institute a blanket ban on cryptocurrency services. Instead, they have to go on a case-by-case basis according to different firms and decide whether or not those firms are eligible for services from those banks. Now, this is a big deal for Israel, in my opinion, because banking problems have been such a big issue for the cryptocurrency industry all over the world, in the United States, across Europe, and parts of Asia. Banks and cryptocurrency firms don't really have, grounds for working relationships, and oftentimes there are bans, like in India, for example, blanket bans banks offering any kind of services to cryptocurrency firms. So Tel Aviv and Israel is already a big tech hub for crypto and just for fintech in general. But I think that, this sort of clarification, possibly, making it easier for banks also to offer firms, cryptocurrency firms with services, could make Israel and Tel Aviv specifically, more of a hub than it already is.
Right. I think it's fair to say that companies here were really in a bind. I mean, the work itself and the projects are obviously above the board and legit, but banks, instead of even examining the case and testing it on a per case basis, just that we don't want to deal with anybody who deals with cryptocurrency, kind of a blanket refusal. So hopefully this will nudge the ball a bit forward. There's still other regulatory bodies that need to weigh in on this, and I'm talking about the Bank of Israel. But definitely an encouraging step forward, and a real solution. Now it's going to be interesting to see how the banks go about selecting and kind of whether they when they start looking at these on a case-to-case basis, whether they authorize them or whether they say, hey, we found there's enough suspicion of money laundering or nefarious activities, and they keep the ban in place, but it's going to be a lot harder for them to justify that now. But let's move on to another part of the world. Your next story is related to Binance applying for a new crypto license in Singapore. Now this made waves in the cryptosphere this week. Can you tell us a bit why this move in Singapore, of all places, is catching everybody's attention?
Right, exactly. So last month, Singapore, instituted something called the Payment Services Act. And what that did was place the cryptocurrency firms in Singapore, under the jurisdiction of the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And now cryptocurrency firms, including exchanges like Binance, have to apply for two licenses. First, they have to register with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, and they also have to apply for a payment institutions license. They have 6 months from now to complete that process. And Binance, of course, already has a presence in Singapore, so they went right ahead and just are taking care of this as soon as possible. So this is all sort of par for the course now in Singapore. These are things that Binance has to do if it wants to stay in Singapore. I think it's important to highlight this for a couple of reasons. First of all, regulatory clarity, as we've said already today once about Israel, is always a good thing for crypto. Second of all, I think that Singapore, in providing these kinds of requirements, in addition to the clarity, it also requires firms like Binance to invest a little bit more in Singapore, invest a little bit more resources, a little bit more attention on establishing themselves or maintaining their establishment in Singapore, which I think is sort of a win-win for Singapore, because Singapore is growing already as a technological fintech financial hub in the world, and the fact that these requirements are there now, I think, adds a little bit more legitimacy and also a little bit more attention to the country.
Right, and then of course, the fact that it's Binance and the 10,000-pound gorilla of the sphere doing it makes it that much more important and significant. Also, maybe relation to the rest of the Asian market. We had a chance to interview Binance CEO CZ on BLOCKTV just the other day, and encourage everybody to look at that interview as well. And we asked him about that. He was saying, we're going to go wherever we can, and we're going to apply for licenses in any market that opens. He even hinted that they have their eye on China and looking at developments there, and if the circumstances present themselves, they'd love to go back. So maybe Singapore is a step closer to that. But let's finish up on this last story. This is analysis that you wrote. That magic $10,000 number. Why 10,000 is Bitcoin's big psychological benchmark, and you went after the answer to that question. So why 10,000, and why is it having so much difficulty remaining above? And is it just a psychological number, or is there more to it?
Right, exactly. So this is a really interesting thing. John Carney, who's now the senior editor at CNBC, wrote a few years ago about the curse of 10,000. And he was talking specifically about the Dow. There was a phenomenon between 1999 and 2003 where the Dow would sort of creep up to 10,000, and then everyone would go, oh my God, we're at 10,000. And then it would just sort of fall. That happened over and over and over again. And I think over the past few years, we've seen something similar happening in Bitcoin. 3 times now, now being the 3rd time, we've kind of crept up to 10,000, even over 10,000, and sort of hovered around there for a while. The commentators are beating their chests and saying this is the real thing, and this is mass adoption, and blah blah blah. Right. And then we just go right back down, and we're still at a point now within that 10 to 15% volatility range where it's hard to say whether we'll go in any direction or whether we'll just continue to maintain, something around this $10,000 level at this point. But, it's interesting to think about why 10,000 might be
right. I mean, is it a, something that the wider, maybe, people that are involved in the sphere and follow the price constantly, that number is arbitrary. But going outwards to the general public, to the people who aren't invested, they see an asset that's trading at that price. That's when you say, all right, that's when not the masses, but that, an individual says, okay, it's above 10K solidly for a while now. The fear of missing out enters the equation and the thinking, and people enter the market. Do you think it's that it's a nice round number for non-crypto people?
Right, exactly. It's just like, it is totally arbitrary. And last week when we were speaking with Iran, she said, people who are actually in the industry don't really care that much about the price of Bitcoin at that point. It's mostly people looking in from the outside. Mm-hmm. But that being said, 10,000, although it is an arbitrary number, it is sort of, easy to identify as a benchmark. And people from the outside who've seen before that 10,000 is the place where Bitcoin, tends to sort of dip back down, are now thinking, oh, we're at 10,000. That means we're about to dip back down again. So even though it might be an arbitrary number, and it not necessarily a rational thing that 10,000 is sort of the stuck point that it is. Right. The fact that we've ended up here before and pulled back from this place before is now maybe being reinforced by other people, who aren't necessarily super involved, who see, okay, we're at 10,000. That means we're about to pull back again. I'm going to sell. And it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. And that's the risk that, that gets entrenched as a narrative, and, it just scares people away. All right. Well, we're dancing around that number, now as well. I know that I have an alert set for when Bitcoin crosses 10K, and it's been happening a lot over the last few days. We'll see what the rest of the week and kind of going forward whether those alerts will stop because we're way above it, or we're going to have to retest it in the next few days, weeks, months, etc. But fascinating to look at that reasoning and the rationale for why that's such a key mark. Rachel, thank you very much for joining us this week, as in every week. It's always a pleasure. And that was it for now. If you want to keep on watching more crypto and blockchain news, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter